my name is Dave Garrett. I'm the co-founder of Club dVIN. We've got Garth Hodgson and Simon Pavitt as well. Today we're talking about generosity, and the reason for that is, when we started putting this project together, we spent a lot of time thinking about what our core values were, and we threw a lot of things against the wall, and we really kind of talked it through. And what we came down with were really three important core values. One of them is curiosity. The second is generosity, and the third is inclusivity. And the reason that we picked those was because, in our mind, the best wine lovers are curious, and the best winemakers are generous, and that the future of wine is really inclusive. And we think that what we hope is that that's the basis for this platform that we're building. Today specifically, we're going to talk about philanthropy, and one of the things that's important there is, when we talk about membership in Club dVIN, and I promise I'll stop talking about that in a second. A lot of times we talk about membership, and we talk about the privileges and the benefits, because that's the main thing that when you're out there building an organization, you talk about what the benefits are. But one of the things that I almost always talk about when I'm doing onboardings with people, or when I'm talking about the club, is that it's not really just about the benefits. It's also about an obligation. I think that people that are privileged enough to join Club dVIN should really have an expectation and an obligation to give back in every way that they can, both to the community and to our little community, but also to the community at large. Whether that's as simple as being generous in what you introducing people to new things, or being generous with your knowledge, or generous with your with your experiences, or obviously, what we're talking about today is generous with philanthropy. So that's Club dVIN. Let's start with Garth, and maybe you could introduce yourself, Garth. I'll just say 2 words. That you are an incredibly impressive, or had an incredibly impressive career as a sommelier at some of the best restaurants in the world. Also representing some of the most important brands in the world, but have since started or become I don't know if you're the founder, but certainly the executive director of a pretty wonderful organization that works with the wine world to do just that, to give back. So I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Legacy Cellar.
Well, you buried the lead there a bit, but that's okay.
Sorry about
it. No. It's interesting when Dave and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, or a month ago, however long ago it was. Time kind of blurs at this point, but we were talking about doing a webinar on generosity, and it sort of really struck me in a lot of different ways. Not only because, as you mentioned, I'm now the executive director of a nonprofit organization called the Legacy Cellar Foundation. And what we do is we take wine collections, curated wine collections, and we turn it into cash for charity. It's a really simple sounding thing, and it's actually fairly simple in the sense that we find people who have wine cellars. They donate it to the Legacy Cellar Foundation, and then our job is to find the best way to get the most money we can for those wines, and then that money goes to whatever charity the donor wants it to go to. It makes us a donor advised fund, and it's a really, really great thing. We've been able to do all sorts of really cool things with wine, including a big dinner that we did just recently with Robert Parker. He donated a 27-liter bottle of Senequanon. It was the only bottle of that size that Senequanon's ever made. We did a dinner to benefit St. Jude, and we raised over $3 million by pairing that wine with some musical entertainment. Nancy Silverton from Los Angeles cooked a meal for us, along with Steve Sampson, another great chef down in Los Angeles. And so, we're able to take one bottle of wine and turn it into $3 million for charity. And that's just one example of what we've done. But generosity sort of comes to me as a key word in the wine world. I actually had a friend recently who left his job in Web 2 to pursue wine. And he called me after the first couple months and he said, Garth, I'm blown away. Like, I've cold called people that are giants in the wine industry, and they've given me their spreadsheets, they've given me their contact information, they've spent hours with me telling me, who to talk to, who not to talk to, what they've learned, giving them 20 years worth of information, everything they've learned in the wine industry, and just let them have that information because they wanted them to succeed. And it's not a unique experience. I think that's something that people have always done in the wine industry. It's sort of the opposite of the rest of the business world, is where sharing is one of the most important things, sharing knowledge, sharing resources, sharing, and I think it all comes from the fact that when you open a bottle of wine, it's more fun to share it. Like, I've drunk really expensive bottles of wine by myself, and I'll tell you what, they taste better when you share it with someone else. And that's probably because you get to open 2 or 3 cool bottles of wine at that point. But generosity is a word that always strikes me in the wine world as something that's sort of like a key to being good at what you do. If you're generous and open and kind and giving, it comes back to you in this industry more than I think a lot of other industries do. If you were, a tire manufacturer and you were giving out your blueprints, I don't know if you would succeed as well, because people would, I don't know anything about tire manufacturing, actually. It just sort of popped into my head as one. Maybe they're very generous too. I have absolutely no idea. No offense to the tire producers out there, but I'm just thinking, in business itself, it doesn't seem as common as it does in the wine industry. And so for me, it's a really sort of great thing. And then, as Dave mentioned, I worked in the restaurant industry for a long time. I was a sommelier at the French Laundry in Napa, Per Se in New York, a couple other restaurants around the world that were pretty cool. And then I worked for Krug Champagne as the national ambassador in the United States for 5 years. So I spent 5 years traveling the country, all 50 states, opening champagne and sharing it with people. And that was a real generous thing too, because my job as an ambassador wasn't a salesperson. I mean, sure, we had to sell champagne, but my job was to be an ambassador, which is a really interesting job in the wine industry, because it just meant I opened bottles of wine. I always tease people that anytime a bottle of Krug was open, I was there. And for 5 years, it was fairly true. And I would just share the story, share the bottle, share a glass with people. And that was enough to turn it into sales in the end for the company. Was, in just being generous with your time, with your information, with your resources. It makes lifelong fans. It makes people who are interested in following, your wine, your career, all sorts of things. I have lifelong friends that I made by just opening a bottle of champagne and sharing it with them. So I don't know. That's my legendary 2-minute introduction. So
Thanks,
I'm
Garth.
sure we'll come back to me on something later.
I'm looking forward to the next time you open a bottle of champagne with me. And one other note, we're thinking about getting T-shirts made. Nobody drinks alone. Like Club dVIN, I think that should be our tagline. Nobody drinks alone.
It's sneaky close to Liverpool, right? Nobody walks alone. Never walk alone. Yeah, you might.
I was thinking of Trolls, no one that gets left behind, or leave no one behind as well. Which is
leave no soldier behind. I like it.
Yeah, I like
so
it.
Simon,
just don't make it red. You'll be fine.
all right. Fair enough. So Simon, I'll bury the lead with you as well. Simon has had a long career. I think if I'm not mistaken, mostly in F1 and other kind of amazing sports before then you moved on to be one of the COO of the London Technology Group.
Yep.
London Technology Group or London Technology Club?
Although it is growing, so it could be a group one day, I'm sure. So yeah.
I like it. Doing venture investing and a bunch of other stuff. But I think the reason that we're most interested in talking to you today is the project, the Wingman Project. Helping people with capstones, and I'd love to know a little bit more about that. So Simon Pavitt, and by the way, interestingly, we're in 3 different countries. I'm in Spain, in Barcelona. Garth is in Napa. Simon's in London. I love this. This is a great kind of Club dVIN moment for me. So Simon, can you talk a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Garth, we've been meaning to chat as well, so this is kind of killing a few birds with one stone. But and also just to say, Garth, I love the simplicity of your idea. And when David and the guys at Club dVIN told me about it, I was like, I need to follow up. So glad to be doing this. Yeah, I'm a wingman, I guess is how you would summarize it. I did spend a bit of time in Formula One, in sports marketing. And then I sort of realized what I wanted to be doing, which is what I call capstones, which are passion projects. So once people have made their money, or they become remarkable, or they have reached a certain level of fame or notoriety or success, they sort of have that moment of what next. And a capstone is a passion project where I'd say it's a little bit more meaningful. It's about giving back, and the crux of it is about sharing their legacy or sharing their knowledge or expertise to benefit others. So yeah, this is very sort of nice segue into what we're talking in terms of generosity, because I think the first thing about a capstone, which is a meaningful passion project, is it normally means someone's being generous. There are kind of 12 ways in which people do that. So whether that's philanthropy is one of them, venture is, which is why I work at London Technology Club. That is someone's passion project that I help manage and support founders and startups and growth companies. And there's lots of different ways, and wine comes up in so many ways. The amount of people that want to have a vineyard or do something meaningful as around their passion of wine comes up, probably half the time, I'd say, especially in ultra high net worth world. So yeah, glad to be here.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I'm really glad to get the two of you together. I'd been trying to put the two of you on a phone call for a long time. So before we get into it, let me just say that if anyone has questions as we go through the process, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll put you on the dais here to ask. Or if you're shy, please feel free to either put a question in the chat or in the Q&A. We're kind of monitoring all of that. So, and we're happy to answer any questions anytime. Don't stand on ceremony. No need to wait. We're happy to answer questions as we go. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about, and I think that this is probably maybe a little bit more for you, Garth, because it's more kind of directly in tune with what you're working on at Legacy. But one of the things that I've found really interesting, just in the wine world over the course of the last 10 or 15 years, is the prevalence of charity wine auctions. I've seen, I remember when the Napa wine auction was a couple of hay bales, and they raised I think they raised less than $1 million their first year. And I think last year it was something insane. But I'd love to get a sense for you on like what's the difference? What are you doing at Legacy Cellar that's a little bit different from that? And then also I'd love to kind of understand a little bit more about why you think that that wine and philanthropy do go so well together. I mean, again, from my perspective, I see it from the perspective of winemakers. I think winemakers are incredibly generous, both with their time and obviously with their product. But it seems like it's catchy, and wine lovers and wine enthusiasts are also seem to be pretty generous as well. So I'd love to kind of get your sense on that. And Simon, feel free to jump in if you've got notes as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when you're doing a silent auction or you're doing an auction anywhere, I mean, in Napa Valley wine auction makes sense because it's centered around wine, but it happens all the time. I mean, you go to Big Brothers Big Sisters or Feeding America or whomever it is, and everybody at their gala events has a silent auction or a paddle raise auction or something of that nature, and there's always wine. And I think it's because wine is sort of, we associate it with coming together. We associate it with friends. We associate it with good times. It's hard to, my life is a lot of it is thinking about champagne. And so it's hard to have a bad day when you're drinking a glass of champagne, and I think wine's kind of the same way. You open a nice bottle of wine and even if your day is rough, you're kind of like, oh, well, this is a nice bottle, or I've been saving this, or, I love this producer, or whatever the case may be. And I think that wine sort of encapsulates a good time. It's also easy to auction off too. I think it's easy to have someone donate it to a silent auction, things of that nature. And so I think it's prevalent, and I think it's something that's never going to go away. The big difference of what we're doing is that, if you're big brothers, big sisters, and you want to have a silent auction, you call the winery and you say, hey, Dave, I've got a silent auction coming up. It's going to benefit big brothers, big sisters. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Can you give me a couple bottles? Can you give me a Magnum? Sure, no problem, right? I can give you a Magnum. I've got 10,000 bottles in my cellar. The big difference is what we're doing at the Legacy Cellar is that, what do you do when you're ready to donate those 10,000 bottles? You can't put it in a silent auction. And you sure as heck can't call big brothers and big sisters and say, hey, I've got 10,000 bottles. Can I drop it off at your office as a donation to your charity? Because as a charitable foundation, they don't have refrigerated storage. They don't have the knowledge to price it. They don't have the ability to sell it. They might not even have licensing to sell it. And so what we do is we sort of act as an intermediary for people who want to donate larger collections of wine. You don't have to donate your entire collection, but significant chunks. And I know I talked about Robert Parker and his one bottle earlier. And so, I think because of the press we've been getting around that, a lot of people are kind of thinking, like, asking the same question you did, like, what's the difference between donating one bottle and what you're doing? And that's sort of like, not a one-off, but it's a unique experience that we did. For the most part, what I'm doing is I'm collecting thousands of bottles or tens of thousands of bottles at a time, pallets at a time, and making that easy, because a non-cash contribution to a charity is a difficult thing. Like, if you're a charity and someone gives you Grandpa's Rolex collection, well, it's easy enough, but Grandpa's wine collection, a little bit harder to deal with. And so that's sort of the place that we're inhabiting in the world of philanthropy. And then what makes us unique is that, and I know I'm answering questions you didn't ask, but that's okay. What makes us unique is that because of the position that we have as a charitable foundation, and then also my connections in the wine world, what we've been able to do is set up partnerships with with wine auction houses, with people who sell wine. Because if you took your bottles of wine, say you just took them to a wine auction and said, hey, I want to sell these wines, and then with the idea of giving all of the money to charity at the end, they take a buyer's premium and a seller's premium, and they charge this and that, and you may make 60-70 cents on the dollar. But with the Legacy Cellar Foundation, you make 100%. So if you've got $1 million collection, $1 million is going to go to charity. And that's just something that makes us really unique, is that we've sort of found an interesting wedge in the market of philanthropy and wine. And we've also found a way to sort of get rid of some of the hurdles that keep more money going to charity. And that's always our goal, is how do we get more money to go to charity, the most money possible. And that's why with Robert Parker's bottle that we just donated, I could have sold that bottle, no problem, and maybe made $1 million on it. I have no idea. But by having a dinner and inviting people to come enjoy the bottle with us, we made $3 million for charity, which is fantastic. So we always are trying to find ways to raise more money. And that, I think, is sort of what makes the Legacy Cellar unique.
That's really interesting. Simon, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that you worked with Arini Global on a project about I'm reaching back in the Wayback Machine, but a big number struck me, which was that most ultra high net worth individuals have somewhere around 1% of their net worth in wine. Am I wrong on that? Do I have the statistic wrong?
That wasn't the one. I mean, I've worked with Pauline and Nicole at Arini. I don't know that stats. That's definitely something that I've not done with them, but it wouldn't surprise me in terms of, if you're an ultra high net worth, most have got a liking for wine, or have drunk a lot of wine, or have been gifted a hell of a lot of wine as well,
Sure.
through their business or through their activities. So it wouldn't surprise me.
Do you find that a lot of the folks that you work with have huge wine collections that are an investment that they're never going to drink?
I think I might be biased. I mean, the London Technology Club, we're based above 67 Pall Mall. You know, we infuse quite a lot of wine into our events. We did a wine tasting with Bulgari and on a lyre, and so I think we're probably slightly biased in the fact that both the founder and myself love wine, and then our non-exec chairman love wine. They've both got very good wine cellars, so maybe we're slightly biased that we attract more people that like wine as well. And the London Club as well, you know.
And what do you think when your folks are talking about their capstone projects, when they're talking about what their, you know, the legacy that they want to leave behind, are they talking about donating their cellars? Are they talking about selling them? What's their take on that? Or is that not a conversation that you're having? Because that's a lot of money. 1% of $100 million fortune is a lot.
Yeah, Garth has definitely unearthed something which is, I don't think it's a, you know, it's not a talked about thing in London often. It is an inheritance. There's an inheritance tax. There's ways around inheritance tax in the UK with wine. So I know quite a few people think of it that way. But I love the angle of the fact that it's, you know, a lot of people. It's the same thing as in business. When is enough? You know, when do you have enough money? When do you have enough bottles of wine? When do you start turning the tables on doing something for others way more? And that's the key question in capstones. It's, you know, when does someone stop thinking about maybe themselves or their ego or acquisition or more, and twist it the other way, which is how can I help others? What can I do with what I have? And optimize that, which I think is exactly what the legacy is looking to do. So chapeau again, Garth.
Can you Simon, talk about one of the projects that or maybe not name names, but in general, can you give an idea of like what a true capstone project is?
There's a few items that I mean it's easier to talk about what a capstone stands for, which is, I suppose it's the third phase in someone's life when they're looking to lose the ego, they're looking to help and benefit others. There's a million different reasons why people would choose a passion project or a capstone. I mean, actually, Garth, you know, would I consider this as your capstone? You know, at what point did you decide that actually you had a tool here or a technology or a way of in helping others, and therefore for you, this is probably your capstone?
Well, I mean, maybe. You know, capstone's a new word to me. It's interesting. I've never heard that before, and so it's an interesting thought. And I'm thinking as you're talking about, I'm thinking about like how we sort of use. Is that a term that is common, or did you make that? You made it up?
Well, I mean, it does exist as a term. It's got a few references, but yeah, I use it as my own kind of. I've written a book on it. I haven't published it, but you know, I talk about it as passion projects, but with a little bit more purpose or meaning. So you know, people are buying football clubs, or they are you know, there's doing you know, buying an art gallery or sponsoring things. I guess what I would say a difference is a passion project versus a capstone is that it's about benefiting others, and they're losing their own ego with it. It's not always driven by philanthropy or legacy. It can be about connecting with their family, or you know, going back to their youth, or rediscovering something that they lost in the old days that they want to bring back. So it's multifaceted. It's probably not for today too much in terms of going down the rabbit hole, but in terms of wine, I would say the main capstones around wine are, you know, people would buy a vineyard and want to set up their own wine. They want to share that with their family. They do it as a project that's driven by reconnecting with their family or their kids or their siblings or their grandkids, or they want to create something actually tangible and be a creator rather than just moving money around, or doing something that's, you know, this is much more closer to earth, closer to nature. So I think with wine, I think capstones there's a natural fit there, and there's a natural output. But I'm finding it interesting that this whole donating to give back, but not just, you know, it's a definite interesting technology or tool that you're creating.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to think about, like, how much do you think, you or I out there talking about what we do gives people the idea that maybe they should give back? I mean, I'm not trying to sit here and take credit for anything, but, with the legacy seller, a lot of people don't realize that, your wine can be an asset. A lot of times, that was simultaneous there. That was creepy. You guys both just, it's noon here, so I'm drinking water. Although I probably shouldn't be. No, but there's a lot of times where people don't realize that wine is an asset. It's something that's tangible in your cellar at home, and it's worth money. And a lot of times people don't consider it when they're doing their legacy planning or their estate planning, or a lot of times it just ends up sort of like dusty old books. It's grandpa's old stuff when he passes away or something like that. And so we're giving people the opportunity to do something with their wine before they pass away, to see what their legacy can be before they, are gone. That's something that's really big to me. But also, just going out there and talking about it, telling people like, hey, you can do this. I found so many people that go, oh, wow, I can. That's cool. And we're creating more giving in the world. We're creating more generosity in the world by just simply giving people the opportunity to do that, right? You go to the grocery store and there is no beer to buy. You're not going to buy any beer. You buy something else. You go to the store and it's there. You might take an opportunity on it. So like by giving people the opportunity to do something that they didn't consider before, maybe we're helping create more generosity. And I think, it's just like anything, and I'm not again trying to take credit for anything, just that the more you see other people doing good, the more you realize, oh, there's good to be done in the world. And I think that generosity begets generosity, and so it's kind of an interesting thought that way.
So Garth, you've been, I mean, I know it's a relatively new venture, but you've been having a lot of conversations with people that have big sellers that are liquidating them for charity. Is there and I know that big Parker bottle, the proceeds went to St. Jude. Mm-hmm. Is there a theme, or can you talk a little bit about what kinds of philanthropy people are doing? Like, what's the most interesting, or there innovative ways that people are thinking about doing philanthropy with those bottles?
It's funny because, like, coming from the wine world, I never really gave philanthropy much thought. It wasn't something that I was ever able to do working in restaurants, because I was trying to decide whether I wanted to pay for a cab or a dinner. So kind of getting into this world now, and seeing there's so many people out there doing so many amazing things, and I get the opportunity to talk to charities on a daily basis, and there are people out there trying to fight homelessness and fight food insecurity and water in third world countries and access to schools for kids. I mean, there's so many really wonderful things out there. There hasn't been anything that really stood out as a really common theme, and I find a lot of people that have wine cellars already, it's a certain level of person that has a big wine collection and then decides to give back. And so far I found that most people have at least a cause or something that they care about. And a lot of them are already sort of connected to a charity or two or multiples. But it's fun to kind of have that conversation with people too, that, say, well, what do I care about? What are the things that are important to me? And how can we go about doing that? And so, it's sort of like probably what Simon's doing with the capstone thing. People come and say, it's time to start doing some good. And then you can have a conversation with them and say, what are you passionate about? What do you care about? What are the things that mean something to you? And then how can we go out and affect the world in that way? And, I think our two ventures sort of jive in that sense, where we're both talking to people who are at a point in their life when they want to start thinking about doing something different, doing something bigger, doing something more important with their time and money and efforts. We convert different items into that, but I think in the end, what we're both doing is sort of giving people that opportunity to, put some more good out into the world.
Spot on, Garth. I'd also say, I think the main thing is to try and get people to do it and think about it earlier in life.
That's so important.
A lot of people do it too late, or they don't get to enjoy the joy of giving back or seeing the fruits of their giving. And also with yours, I think there's so much opportunity to innovate in terms of, the way that people are going to be doing it. So you'll get creative people. So you're already just giving people the bold moment, and then I think some amazing ideas will come off the back of how to optimize it as well.
And Simon, forgive me if I'm wrong, but it feels to me like how you're describing capstone projects. It's a much more not necessarily not comparing and contrasting, but it seems like it's a very active endeavor for the people that you work with. Less a writing a check and going away, and much more people that have been successful. Typically, I'm going to guess mostly in business, and with the ability to actually use those, not just their money, but also those skills to try to give something back. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing is it's multifaceted, but I think the main thing is that people want a change of direction. They want to do something maybe often for themselves. It's not just about others all the time. It can be about something that's missing in life, that they promised that they would do in their childhood, or that they feel like their ego's taken over, and therefore they need to go back to when they weren't quite so driven about themselves. There's millions of different ways. I think the main thing is, and all I'm always saying is that it's not about judging people. People will have loads of different motives, but I know that the most joyful or the most fulfilling are when it helps others, 100%. But I'm not saying that that's the exact blueprint for a capstone. Sometimes it can be somebody's been selfless throughout their life, and actually their capstone's about being more selfish. It's horses for courses, but I'd say that the majority of the ones I see, especially in philanthropy, obviously people want to be philanthropic. Even in philanthropy though, and Garth, I'd love to get your opinion on this. Lots of people don't actually want to be named, for example, as a donor, or they don't want to be have a building named after them if they're donating. Often though, the charity benefits more when that person puts their name to it, because it is getting other people to think about it in their group or in that world. So do you get often people talking about being anonymous or not wanting to be known for it? Because actually a lot of the time it's not about them, it's about helping others.
Yeah, I mean, anonymity is something that's really important, and that's sort of like for us on our first intake when we start talking to new clients, is we ask them if they're interested in being named in their giving. And it's really interesting. I was having a conversation yesterday with a group from a charity, and they were talking about how the best way that they can succeed is by finding groups of friends, right? Like if you're going to throw an event, find a friend and say, hey, help us promote this. And they go out to their friends and people they know and people in their community and sort of talk things up. And so I think, anonymity is a way a lot of people like to go. But when you're really trying to do the most good, when you're really trying to sort of raise the most money and the most awareness, it really is sort of being named. I don't know if necessarily like seeing Simon Pavitt on a library would necessarily make more people want to go out and give money, but the fact that you can do that, the fact that there is the opportunity to sort of be public about it, makes people say like, oh, there are people who are giving, there are people who are doing these things. And so I don't necessarily think it's the specific name of the person. It's just the fact that these things come from private individuals, not from businesses. It's not, Coca-Cola that's building this library. It's a private donation from a private family or foundation. I think those sorts of things really kind of, philanthropy's built so much of this country, and I'm sure it's the same in other countries, that without philanthropy and without the generosity of other people, nothing would get done. I mean, if we just relied on the governments for money and funding on things that we'd still be living in stone huts probably.
One of the things that Garth, you and I talked about a long time ago, and just sort of pivoting the conversation a little bit to talk about blockchain and NFTs, because that's an important part of what we do at Club dVIN, and we've been thinking for a long time about ways to use NFTs and use Web3 as part of philanthropy to give back. Do you so one of the conversations you and I had was, what if when you take those bottles and sell them for the for the charity, we had talked before about attaching NFTs to those bottles that would then not only serve as a kind of an interesting certificate of authenticity coming from a particular seller, but also that would send a royalty, as everybody, I think everybody on this that's listening to the call, and if you don't understand how royalties work with NFTs, please pipe up and I'm happy to talk about it. But typically the royalty on an NFT will go back to the creator. In our case, for digital corks, we send the royalty back to the winemaker. But in the case of someone donating their cellar, you and I had talked about the possibility of taking that royalty and sending it back to the charity itself. So what that it effectively does is takes a one-time gift and turns it into, assuming that those bottles change hands in the aftermarket, turns it into more of a gift that keeps on giving. Have you had any further thoughts about that, or is that something that you think is that innovation that you think that would be interesting to try? You think that would work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting that you have the opportunity, right? Because when and even for winemakers too, when a bottle of wine leaves or when a charity auction happens, the money is exchanged and it's over. You never see that bottle again. You never see that money again. And there's opportunity through the smart contract and an NFT to write it in a way where the money can go back to a charity if the bottle's sold again. So we sell a bottle of wine, for $100, and a certain percentage goes to the charity, and it's sold again for $150, another certain percentage goes back. And it's one of those things where, if something's really exchanging hands or changing hands on the secondary market a lot of money can be generated for the charity, secondary money for a charity. So not only is it the first sale, but it's the subsequent sales as well. And, even if someone wanted to do it, if say we had a winery that was selling wines with NFTs attached, they could say, well, we'll take 0.5% or 15% of the money that we make or whatever it is, and put that towards a charity that matters in their local area too, whether it's helping a school or a something in their neighborhood that really means something to them too. And so it's really exciting in the sense that there's opportunity for NFTs. A lot of people think about the Bored Apes or whatever, and how they own the NFT and the price goes up or sometimes down, and they are making money on that. But not a lot of times are people thinking about secondary sales and how money can be made for other people through those sales. And so that's kind of the fun of what Club dVIN can do, is that not only can you be part of this great membership and you have access to fun wines and you get to do cool things, is that you have the opportunity, the more wine you buy and the more, if you sell wine and buy wine, you're actually generating more revenue for charities, for winemakers, for everybody involved in the situation. It's not just like, Dave's going to get nicer black t-shirts. It's like the people who are making the wine, the people that are, in the local communities will be making more money as well too. So I think just by being a member of Club dVIN, you have the opportunity to give back to winemakers and charities all over the world, which is, something that, name me another club that does that.
That's a good plug. Thanks, Garth. That's great. Simon, have you had any thoughts about ways that Web3 can help in with your clients or the people that you work with in giving back?
As you know, we've been looking at it from a wine perspective. I totally agree with everything that Garth's saying. I find it really interesting that not just the winemaker, but anybody that's a trusted source of a wine ownership. So most people think of wine as NFTs as anything going forward. Any winemaker that's producing wine going forward now, the original source, and there'll be lots of ways to authenticate. Whereas actually someone like Robert Parker or anybody with a trusted wine cellar, this is a huge opportunity for them too. Definitely. There's definitely some cachet and some authenticity with anything that comes out of Robert Parker's wine cellar versus anything on the secondary market. So I think that's really interesting. And NFTs has been a super interesting space from the art side of things, and it's all coming back to the creator. So the royalty side of thing is what's really everyone's finding interesting in NFTs, and with the utilities coming in and everything like that. That's as far as I've got in terms of capstones. Actually, I've spent most of my time in NFT world thinking about wine and NFTs. It just seems
you
like
you and me both.
Yeah, yeah. Luckily.
And it's funny that you mentioned the utility part. That's one of the things that we talked to with Garth as well. Like, if you it's not the digital corks provide the royalty, and you can send the royalty back to the charity, but it also, the ownership of those digital corks also creates interesting community. And I find that to be, the ability to be able to use to create utility and community around that. Think about like the idea of creating what we talked about for Garth, for example, was if you have one or some number of these digital cork NFTs from the Robert Parker collection, or from the St. Jude's collection, then you might be able to take that and use it to like as an entryway for a wine dinner, or the ability to be able to have a dinner with a winemaker, or the ability to have some of these experiences that aren't just wine, and building those experiences kind of into the contract is, I think, another way that you can take that, the simple value of, hey, I'm going to donate this wine. You can really rev up the amount of money that you can give to the charity by A, having a portion of those aftermarket sales go, but then B, also having special utility with those NFTs that give people experiences, or even really just the ability to buy more wine. The first seat in the first row to at the next time there's an auction. So I think the utility piece is really important as well. So I just realized we're over time, guys. I don't know how we got here so fast, but let me give you each an opportunity to say like a closing remark, or if there's some other important point that you want to make, and then I think we should let everybody go and have a glass of wine themselves.
And
Garth, you want to go first?
Yeah,
Garth, and then Simon, you did promise to talk about the Jubilee, so I'll expect that in your closing remarks. Garth, you want to go first?
No, I just think that it's interesting. I wish that we had more than 45 minutes to talk about this, and I think it's a really interesting topic, and something that I've given a lot of thought in my life and career to, and I just hope that people sort of take the generosity piece of more than just giving $5 next time you walk past the little guy ringing the bell at Christmas or something like that. There's lots of ways to be generous. There's lots of ways to kind of give back, even if you don't have the money to do it. You can do it with your time, with your knowledge, with your expertise, or just joining up with people who have more resources, and finding ways to help them give back, or become part of something that's bigger than you. And so for me, it's something that keeps evolving in my head, and this conversation's been great. And I've got some new ideas, and I'll take them out into the world, hopefully. And after the Jubilee this weekend, of course, and make them real.
Thanks, Garth.
I mean, well, as I say, like I was getting excited earlier about the Jubilee. This is day 2 of 4. We were saying beforehand that it's like the Great British Bake Off, but every village, the village up the road, it's like on steroids. There are bunting everywhere. So we've got 2 more days of it, and it's bringing everyone together. So it's quite nice. It is fun. I think everyone just in England and the UK is enjoying just 4 days off, to be honest. Overall, I think just like Club dVIN, just like NFTs, just like legacy sellers, these are all in early stages, and they're all clever ways of fueling creativity. I think there's so much that creativity is going to come out of these once people get their heads around NFTs and Web3 and what you're offering, especially as well, Garth. I think there'll be some really, really clever ways that people will optimize giving back, optimize projects. So I think that's the most exciting thing about this. This is really early stages, and that's when it's most exciting because there's lots to come.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree with that. I, was listening to a podcast earlier talking about NFTs and or talking about Web3 and really kind of comparing, where we are in that cycle to where, Web2 was, and we're really just in the. They were comparing it to MP3s. Like, remember when, in order to play an MP3, you had to like load it on your computer and like you had to actually like run a line, like a line command or a command line program in order to play an NFT on your computer. And that wasn't very long ago. That was like 2002. That was 20 years ago. So think about where we'll be in Web3 in 20 years. And I really hope that with this group, the three of us and the rest of the club, that we can really be on the forefront of using blockchain and using NFTs to and hopefully a lot with you, Garth, to make to create more opportunities for philanthropy, to create more opportunities for generosity. It really is an important thing for us and for our members, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time today to talk about this, and hopefully we'll have many more of these.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys. Yeah, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Take care. All right, bye-bye.